Now, a few days ago, we'll turn attention to politics I'm talking about now. The New Patriotic Party was in the Ashanti region. We brought you extensive coverage here at your election headquarters for their annual Delegates conference. One of the key things that was echoed at the conference was winning the next election. They call it breaking the eight, and that's where that phrase also gained the peak of its popularity. We had heard about it. But the question still remains whether the NPP will be a formidable team in the 2024 elections, or a formidable party, some would say. My colleague Benjamin Akakpo has been interacting with senior lecturer at the University of Ghana Business School, Dr. Kobi Mensah. He has some interesting thoughts on NPP's chances in the 2024 elections and who will be the best presidential candidate for the party, even though the party claims that official campaigning has not begun because they have not opened the floodgates for that to happen. But already a number of names have been bandied around. Let's listen to Dr. Kobi Mensah.
Thank you so much for joining us. In recent times, the NPP held its delegates conference from the constituency level to the regional level, and then the national level in Kumasi at the Heroes Park, Babayara Sports Stadium. But some questions remain about what was held, the relevance of the entire occasion, the pomp and pageantry, yes, but what were the gains of that entire enterprise? And moving forward, what should the NPP as a party do to be able to break the eight, which was one of the focal areas for discussion on the day? What do they do? Well, we're going to be having an interaction with someone who follows this space and who is going to be sharing his thoughts on whether the NPP can, in fact, break the eight. Joining us for this all-important discussion, he is a senior lecturer at the University of Ghana Business School, where we find ourselves today. He also is a political marketing expert. It's none other than Dr. Kobi Mensah. Doc, thank you for your time.
Thanks so much.
It's been a while, actually.
Yeah, it's been, we've been so busy at the university, COVID and so many other things, so we have to sort of take it easy, make sure that we are doing the best that we can.
Right.
So good to see you.
Good to see
very
you.
Sharp.
Good to see you too. We try.
Excellent.
Great. So let's dig right into the crucial matters. Recently, the NPP had its delegates conference. What are your general reflections on that entire enterprise in terms of organization, in terms of content, what exactly they did at the delegates conference, and maybe some matters that detract from what they were looking at? I mean, look at the articles, for example, that they were supposed to deliberate upon, 90 to 38, and eventually not many seeing the light of day, a lot of it being passed on to the neck. What are your reflections on what was held?
All right, thank you. Let me firstly say that I've been following NPP for a long time. In fact, that is the singular party in my PhD studies. So my PhD is on NPP. 2000 elections, why? Because that was the novelty. The first time we saw mostly new things, come to play when you talk about party political organization. And with that background, you can attest that I've sort of know the party in detail from academic perspectives. I've done quite a lot of publications on NPP procedures, so I have, humbly I can say, some authority to actually talk about the structures. And let me say that in 2000, we saw quite a number of newness, from the NPP. And having spoken to people like Joke Obechebilamte of blessed memory, obviously Odei Sykes, what called Damboche, there were quite a lot of exciting things that they talk about. And even from President Kufuor's perspective, they used to say due process. That's one singular, you can say, attribute of the NPP, due process, democratic tradition. And so going forward, when you look at that foundation, and you think that things are actually departing from what it used to be, you have to be concerned.
Is that what you see?
Of course.
There's some departure from what the party used to stand for?
Absolutely. And I think that I'm not the only one saying it. Quite a number of observers, whether they're media observers, academics, or even ordinary Ghanaians, can tell you that the party is gradually departing from what it is or from what it used to be. And if we do not be concerned, or we do not become concerned about that, I think that it goes a long way to affect our democracy. Don't forget, it is something that actually culminates to the national, political system. And so we have to be concerned and talk about it. And that's why I put that in my piece that you actually, refer to. Because I think that there were quite a lot of things that didn't seem well and didn't actually go according to the due process that the political party MPP actually talk about. And that's why, that particular concern.
Doc, so why do you feel this departure seems to be happening? And what are some of those that you've seen in most recent times?
Yeah, I think that the people have become increasingly, personal. They put forward their own ambitions ahead of states, so ahead of the party. Personal, yeah, exactly. Personal interest, if I should put it, over the general well-being of obviously the country and of the political party or the political system that they lead. And as a result, it's making them do things that they don't realize that it's a counter to the very principles that they actually claim to hold on. And that's why some of us are a little bit concerned. Because we see that when you talk about democratization, you expect a certain consolidation at some point. Right. And I'm sure that if you ask some of my colleagues in political science, they will tell you, over the years, you would expect that parties would be part of the developmental process for us to achieve democracy. Of course, it's a stakeholder approach. Voters do their best. We rally them to go to the polls, even though they're not satisfied with the delivery. No one can claim that we have actually realized what we call political dividends in this country. We're not. We haven't realized it yet. Voters always do their bit, going to the polls, listening to the political parties, what they have, whether they are telling us the truth or not, we listen to them. We go to the polls and elect them. Now, when they get into power, they decide to do what they want to do. Right. And that is not fair. It's not a fair situation at all. And so we have to be bold to tell the political parties that you cannot take the people for granted just because of your personal interest. We have to restrict ourselves within the confines of the interest of the state and of the political parties that they lead. And that's why some of us do what we do.
Okay. So you're talking of this departure from what is right or what the party has stood for. Let me find out whether you find this to also be feeding into that trajectory of departing from the tenets, so to speak, of that political party. We saw in recent times there were, what should I say, restrictions, basically, that those who might want to contest or would have interest in contesting the flag bearership position of the party should not mount banners ahead of, in Kumasi, ahead of the delegates conference. But what did we see? We saw a number of them with banners sprouting all over the place, and it took the assignment by the chief of staff of Simon Osei-Mensah, the Ashanti regional minister, together with, I saw him with Sampine, the KMA boss, for them to collaborate and get rid of these. But we saw them there, and someone like Alacha Mante's supporters, they complained that they were trying to abide by the rules, but they were missing out. Yeah. How do you respond to that and put that side by side with the fact that at the same event, some people were given pride of place in terms of opportunities to speak, and I'm speaking here about the Vice President, Dr. Mahamudu Bawumia. Do you see this to be a bit of hypocrisy
of course,
on the part of the party? Are they intentionally sidelining some people?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you could actually realize a certain attempt, deliberate attempt, to give a certain caliber of people the unfair advantage, at the particular grounds. I mean, just as you referred to, there was a directive that nobody mounts that, and that speaks to party discipline. I mean, how could party itself, come out with a clear directive that nobody mounts that, the billboards, the banners, etc. Yet there are some people who are actually allowed, as you said, pride of place, to actually do that. That speaks to the kind of things that we're talking about, the indiscipline, the idea that people, because of their personal interest, aren't actually following the party rules and the party traditions, which is very dangerous, because I feel that it would, at some point, we would not find that, we'll kind of water down some of these things, and then it seep into the broader national kind of electioneering, where people don't think that even by adding one vote, it's a serious crime enough. but they would go ahead and do, stuffing and all these things. So I think
but let me contest you here. Are we not seeing that already? I mean, we've seen it time and again. I mean, even in Parliament, there have been near fisticuffs and actually fisticuffs in Parliament just recently. We saw what happened between the 6th and the 7th of January when it had to come to a vote to elect a speaker. Aren't we seeing this in our
exactly? And that's the point I'm making. It's degenerated into that. I mean, would you ever thought about? I don't know. I mean, I witnessed, the Parliament that we had J.H. Mensah. Obviously, we have President Nado himself in Parliament. We had Jurase and Co in Parliament. Did you ever, I don't know whether you witnessed that particular Parliament, did you ever thought that, did you ever think that, we would have such a situation in Parliament? No.
If you ask me whether I would have expected it maybe in the, even maybe in the first Parliament, on the back of, well, maybe not the first, the second Parliament,
yeah.
On the back of some of the rancor and the fact that in the first Parliament, the opposition
was
not
NDC.
even in the picture.
That's right.
That. So you would expect that maybe moving forward.
That's correct.
But in the 8th Parliament, now that took me by surprise.
Exactly, and that's what I'm saying. We are gradually degenerating into that kind of indiscipline nationally because we're not, in the local parties, we're not putting our foot down for people to obey the processes and to do what is right. We're taking a lot of things for granted. And that affects the national polity. And that's why I'm saying that it is not good for us to sit down and watch them unconcerned. You hear people say, oh, it's just for politics, just politics. And I said, wow, that does not mean do the wrong things. That does not mean that you have the justification to do the wrong thing. But they will tell you, Doc, we're just doing politics. That's not acceptable. Politics doesn't mean do the wrong things. It means that obey the rules of democracy, the democratic tenets. You have to, spell it out, and once you've spelled it out, everybody's supposed to obey it. If they don't obey it, what's the penalty? We don't have some of these things going forward. And then we see them, trample over. Look, if you look at the way, and they're talking about why they should actually elect their flag bearer 2 years, down the line, because it would afford them space to solve, problems that actually arise after the election. But that's exactly the kind of things that they do that people become so peeved that it makes it difficult for you to mend the differences. I mean, if someone goes into elections and they feel that the platform was equal, there was an equal playing field, the rules were clear. Exactly. Why should it take someone 2 years before they come on board? I mean, once the election is declared, they would go ahead and then, congratulate the winner and say, okay, I'll bring my team back into the party for us to move forward. After all, you're going to fight a common enemy. But if people feel that they have been had done by, without having a clear-cut rules that is actually governing everybody, without knowing that, yes, there was an equal playing field, then of course they're going to be very peeved. They're going to make it ungovernable for you to actually enjoy your leadership, and you're going to, in the end, lose the election that you actually...
That is not going to endure...
to the benefit of the... Exactly.
Exactly. Right. So very quickly on this point, I just want you to be very brief, because I'm actually digressing a bit. But this duopoly of NPP and NDC, and again, we'll be talking about breaking the AIDS, and even we're talking about that because we've had a system where it's 8 years for the NDC, 8 years for the NPP, 8 years for the NDC and all of that. Do you feel maybe we should get to the point where we have a counterbalance, a countervailing force, a political party that can threaten or even kick out these two parties before we'll get them sitting up to do some of the things you're talking about? Do you feel we need that?
Well, I don't think that the kind of political system we have is set up for that. That's my feel. Unless we change it, because in most regimes or most countries that actually have first past the post, it's very difficult for you to have a third force. Right. So I keep telling people that if we're going to have a third force, that we want to establish the PR, the proportional representation, where people can actually vote for preferences, and then we can actually get some other appreciable vote for other political parties for them to actually go into parliament. Yeah. But if we have first past the post, there's no way you're going to have a third force.
So hypothetically,
it was very difficult.
If it were possible, hypothetically, and it's not impossible to speak.
No, it's not.
Hypothetically, it's not. If it were that possible, would you say that is what it would take to get these two parties to
perhaps
sit up? Because
yes.
I mean, right now it's obvious they're taking us for granted.
Absolutely. I mean, perhaps yes. I mean, if the other political parties, and don't forget, it's also part of those games that they play, mafia, sponsoring people to counter other people, and that's what is making it difficult. If the other political parties can be on their own, solidly on their own, perhaps they can actually challenge the strength of these two parties, and perhaps it will make us, be alert. But of course, let's also look at the other side. We thought that if we have a hung parliament, things could be better. Well, we have a hung parliament. What's happening? So I think that the key point is being disciplined. Whether we have a duopoly or we have a multi-party, we need to have party structures that have commitment to discipline and saying that the rules are here. If you flout it, you get punishment, regardless of who you are. But here is the case: we have political parties who are making exceptions for people, and they don't see that as a serious issue. They see it as, oh, we're playing politics. We just want to be expedient.
In the last election in 2020, we saw some of those, and it cost the party.
Of course.
Look at the Fomena situation.
Yeah. So in the end,
the member of parliament who is now second deputy speaker.
That's right.
I mean, look at his situation, going independent, and now basically arm twisting.
And so many other people have lost their seat. Why? Because the party was not disciplined enough to make sure that they're giving people a fair chance, and to make sure that when people are not satisfied with the processes, they have the right structures to actually deal with them. I always say that our political parties are wrongly set up. Why would you want to give the leadership of the party to the presidential candidate to be a de facto leader? Immediately someone is selected as a presidential candidate, they become a de facto leader of the party. But that's wrong, because they have a key interest in winning elections. So imagine that during the primaries, you were not my support, you were not within my support base, you were supporting another candidate. But then you are now going to contest for parliamentary seat. If you do not have the resources, I'm not going to be interested in your agenda to ask the party to actually support you with resources. I would rather take resources to those I felt were my support bases. And that's what leads to the parties, getting their MPs kicked out, because they are not in the good books of the one who is the flag bearer. If the party chairman and the party general secretary are the ones who are controlling the party, the real leaders of the party, they look at the party's interest and say, hang on, you go fight for your presidential candidacy, but we also have to ensure that we win our number of seats in parliament.
Right.
It's not happening.
Right.
And so these are some of the issues.
The party chairman only takes over after election, and if there's a loss,
that's the thing.
Then the party it reverts.
And that's why I say that you do not need 2 years down the line to market your candidate. Right. The party, as a functional institution, supposed to be on the road 24/7, whether you're in government or not. And so, if the party is working, and you're also working, and when you go to England and other places, they call it, like, for example, they say the parliamentary British, Labour Party, or the parliamentary, Conservative Party. The parliamentary party is different from the party, that is, out of parliament. And that is not to say that they're completely different entities, but the parliamentary party see itself as working in parliament, right, of course, to the benefit of the larger party. So it's some sort of
continuum, which is what we're not seeing.
That's the thing. So right, you need to have some sort of a separation and an integration at the same time, where the party has to separate itself from the members of parliament because certain things are not, you should be able to do so. Where they have to come together, you should be able to do so. But we have put all powers in the hands of the presidential candidate. We keep complaining that the president of the country has too much power. What about the presidential candidate? They have too much power.
Right.
They have too much power. They decide who become, part of your inner circles, of course. Why? Because they are the ones who go out for the money. And the parties aren't doing anything. So for me, our parties are wrongly set up. And that is what is actually giving us all these sorts of problems. Okay. They can't, tell, the vice president's support bases that you can't mount your billboards, etc., because we have actually given a directive. But they know that he holds power. And so they couldn't actually be forthright with him. But they could actually say that to other candidates, Boache Jacko, Akotose, Chairman, because they do not have the power now. So I think that we have to look at some of these things and mend them, in the political parties, if we want to have a proper democracy. Because don't forget, the political parties are one of the key stakeholders in the democratization project that we run. And if they're not properly set up, we're going to get any better in the democratic systems as we want.
So let's look at this. Breaking the 8. Mm-hmm. Can the MPP break the 8, first of all? And what would it take for them to do so? Yeah. What are the crucial elements to look at?
Of course, it's not impossible. I mean, for me, coming from my background, political marketing, we believe that parties go into elections with at least 3 elements. You're talking about the candidate, you're talking about the party itself, you're talking about the policy. Obviously, embedded in them is the ideology. The ideology actually sort of pin all these 3 together. But the crucial part of the equation within the political marketing frame is the voter. Right? So we say that it's no longer the ideology at the center, but the voter. What does the voter want? That's what is at the center. So the party is organizing itself in the know that the voter wants a particular style of governance. The voter wants a particular policy. The party is choosing a flag bearer in the know that the people, the voters want a certain attributes, that they want to vote for. The party is actually pulling the policy ideas together because in the know that the voter want a certain deliverables. Now, so I asked myself a simple question. You govern in 8 years, and you're going back to the people and say, I've governed 8 years, I want you to give me another, 4 years, breaking the 8. With what? That's the key question.
And maybe at this juncture, it is key to mention that in 2016, the win was, some would say, up to 1 million votes. It's around 800,000 plus. When it comes to 2020, it was whittled down to about 500 to 600,000 votes, which means that some net losses have been made, but that is still enough to win an election, in 2024. Whether or not whoever is selected as flag bearer can get that is another question altogether. But you would see that, as is to be expected, the gains that were made in 2016 have been eroded. I mean, we can even see it in Parliament, where there's been a net loss of about 42 seats in Parliament. Yeah. So you put all of that into perspective and look at it. Can they do it?
That's right. So if you split the contest into 2 different, the parliamentary, which is very much local, and the presidential, which is national. Now, the list of the 3 of these factors that I talked about, obviously, people have already, tasted your governance. They've had a fair idea of what you stand for the past 8 years. And don't forget, they have a very fresh memory going into that election. So for you as an incumbent, you have fresh memories in the minds of the voter. That of the opposition has about 8 years that has elapsed, all right, whether they did fantastically or not. Sometimes people can barely evaluate. And I always say that governments always perform better when they're out of power. Right. Yeah, because that's where you have the now government messing up, and then you're comparing that with it and say, oh, I thought the other one was better. Meanwhile, when the other one was there, you were complaining. Right. So you have a fair idea of evaluation based on the current, performance, and then the previous, and then you're doing your evaluation there. Now, when you have a very fresh memory of what your governance was, and you're asking the people to actually vote for you with the same player, what else are you going to tell them differently? That's my point. That's my question.
But in this instance, you can say that Nanado is, and he's made it clear that he's going to step aside, but he wants to hand over to a party member.
That's the point. So my argument is, if Ghanaians think that this particular administration has really discharged all what it said that it would do, and comparatively with the NDC, very well, then of course it's not even a rocket science for any strategists to think that handing over to Bawumia can actually win the election. I mean, I'll give you a typical example. In Clinton's administration, one of the best years of America, when Clinton was delivering all these, employment figures, and the economy
was booming.
Yeah, is the economy stupid? That kind of, phrases that they were using. Why didn't, Al Gore win the election?
Yeah.
Ask yourself that question.
Of course, we have the infamous Florida case
of course.
Thank
and of course, and the point is that Al Gore wanted to separate himself from Clinton because of Monica Lewinsky's case, right? But people thought that it was a stupid strategy because you were delivering success. Why don't you want to be part of the success message? Yet Americans kicked them off. They kicked them out, all right? So the Democrat didn't win the election, not because they performed badly, but because perhaps there was a voter fatigue. We've been saying Al Gore and Clinton back to back. Then you're going to have another 4 years. Sometimes the voters want new faces. One of the things that you could actually look at in 2000 elections, we have had PNDC, NDC for so long, 19 years, same faces on TV. Sometimes people want to see fresh faces. They want to see what other people can do, fresh ideas.
So what do you suspect in this instance? It is a possibility that the aids could be broken.
They can, but a lot of conditions.
What would it take? And for example, as you situate that briefly, I want you to also look at the Bawumia Alan Kyerematen thing. If you'd noticed, at the Delegates conference, there was rapturous applause when Alan Kyerematen, entered the scene. Similar for the vice president when he took the stage and spoke. You've spoken about the fact that, well, he had the advantage of speaking. But when you compare these two heavyweights, Alan Kyerematen has been there. In 2007, he ceded to Nanado, saying, I'll not go for the runoff, let him go and all of that. People feel Nimreni, it is his time. Others also say the vice president, Dr. Bawumia, has accounted very creditably for himself. So they have to weigh that. There are those who go to the Dumbo tradition bit. There are those who say it is time for the Ashantis again and all of that. When you consider all of these, which of these two would you feel has the upper hand or the possibility of leading the party, and what would the consequences be?
I mean, in all these equations, who counts? The voter. Whether it's a Dumbo tradition or, what do you call
Ashanti,
they don't count. They don't count. And that's why I was telling you that in the modern era, we're talking about the voter, not the ideological positions. So the voter is the one that counts. Is the voter satisfied that whoever was on the ticket and whoever said that I could do A, B, C, D, have they discharged their duties to the satisfaction of the voter? If the question is no, or the answer is no to that question, then why present that candidate again? All right, for me, saying that Alan Bawumia pairing, I will ask you the question, is that what the voters want? You can use that to satisfy your party people, to sort of bring unity, I agree.
But can it satisfy Ghanaians?
That's the point. That's what you're looking at. And are Ghanaians satisfied that all that, the platform that Bawumia stood on, and he's a fantastic guy. For me, a young guy, and we have always been talking about having young people in the seat. And I agree perfectly on that. Amazing guy. But the point is, you haven't delivered. We have to be straight. They haven't delivered? He hasn't. I mean, all the platform that he mounted one platform, one singular platform, economic emancipation. Taxation to production, have we had it? The question is,
everyone will remember those. How many were they? The questions he posed to the Mahama administration time and again.
Yeah, exactly. To Emisata.
Well, Emisata.
And then later Setekwe.
Time and again. And that is one thing, because most people look at him and they say, okay, you say digitization and digitalization. Yes, and you say the economy must grow through these. But that was not the platform he came on. For me, in that election was a middle class election. Right.
The middle class rallied absolutely behind Bawumia. We all believed in it. I mean,
don't you believe in that anymore?
We believed in that, but I don't anymore.
You believed in it, but
I believed in them. I thought that he could do it. I mean, all those things that he was talking about, and not only myself, quite a lot of my colleagues actually trusted, and they believed that it could happen. It didn't happen. And then as marketers will talk about stilt marketing, you Nicodemously move on to another, platform which is digitized. I tell you what, any of us can actually do that, because Silicon Valley, when you go there, all these tools are there. I mean, into IT. I mean, I do sort of IT stuff.
Right.
And look, these solutions are there. Anyone can implement them. And I'm not criticizing him that it's a fantastic thing, and I am #1 fan of digitalization. But that was not the concern of this country. The concern that you were brought, to the ticket was about the economy. And you remember the last election when NDC selected, Professor Jane. Everybody was like, he's not an economist. How can he battle Bawumia? But Bawumia has left the economic platform long ago.
Right.
He doesn't talk about economy anymore.
There was no contest.
No, of course
no one was filling
He's
that
left
space.
that platform. The platform that President Nana stood on was free SHS, social intervention. You can argue that he delivered it, whether to your satisfaction or not. He did it. But for me, that wasn't the best that they could do. I was not for free SHS, and I had always spoken against it, that it was a wrong approach. You need a means testing plan to wean off some people like myself. If I had my son in SHS and you're saying that it's free, why should it be free for my son, for example? I have to pay. But they had it wrongly because political expediency. Of course, he stood on corruption. I don't think that...
populism, so to speak.
Exactly. I don't think that the president delivered on corruption. He didn't. And not me. A lot of people have actually said that, all right? And Bawumia stood on economic. I mean, the platform he stood on is what we're going to judge him on.
Right, it's clear. I don't want us to digress too far, because once we bring in free messages and other things, it will take us way into different arenas. But focusing on the two once more, I just want a straightforward answer in maybe some 30 seconds. Bawumia versus Allen, whom do you see coming up tops?
No, I mean, I'm very clear on that. Look, I feel that from all the things that...
If you can't say who you feel coming up tops, at least whom you... If you have to choose.
Yeah.
If you're a delegate...
In my opinion, I think that it's much more for a candidate to supposedly break the 8 as and Bawumia. And I can tell you why, as I said, I do not see how the packaging of the message would be as a strategist, all right? Because you go to the market, and when there's a product failure, you want to remodel it, and you want to tell people that there's a new management. Companies don't go to the market with the same production or with the same product, thinking that the market will change its mind. The market would not change its mind. The market would be solid. They would evaluate you based on your performance, and if you didn't, they would not patronize you. And that's a clear message. Now, if by the end of this term, they can show amazing records, of course, why not? The market is dynamic. They would actually respond. But if we're exactly what we have, I'm afraid I don't think you would expect the market to react any differently.
So old wine, maybe new wineskin, or old wine, old wineskin, it will not work.
No, it's not going to work.
Okay.
You have to show the performance.
Right before we wrap the conversation, though, another tricky bit, and as you've digested this issue about whether the MPP can break the 8, it becomes crucial.
Yeah.
The MPP's own constitution talks about primaries, political primaries. I'm talking about the members of parliament and the processes they have to go through so that you can claim, I am the party's parliamentary candidate in X constituency. The majority leader, Osei Mensah Bonsu, at the Delegates conference recently said, well, to ensure that stability and ensure that our party can be strong and face off with the NDC and other political parties, let our incumbent MPs go unfettered, uncontested. How do you feel about that?
That's really surprising, coming from a so-called Democrat. And of course, he's a minister.
But how surprising, I'm sorry, how surprising would it be? Because in the 2020 election, I mean, he himself.
He's been saying this.
He himself and others, they called for same. So
exactly, that's what I'm saying. It's surprising coming from him as a crusader for that. And the reason being that he's a minister of parliament. Parliament is one of the symbols of democracy, all right? Minister of Parliamentary Affairs. It's one of the symbols of democracy. You want to be seen championing the principles and tenets of democracy. If, for example, the president tells you that, I feel that I'm doing very well and we're on course for economic emancipation. As a result, I want to change the constitution for me to go for the next term. Would you be happy? That's the principle. You're saying that you are the only one who can actually perform so miraculously well that we should leave you in parliament. Who was born in parliament? As one of my friends in the political science, Issa Santo would actually say, no one was born in Parliament. We are all outside Parliament, and there is nothing like apprenticeship for Parliament. People do not have anywhere to go and learn the skills of Parliament other than going to Parliament. So we have every right to kick you out. You cannot say you are the best brain that we have to ring fence you to be in Parliament and to do what for us. I mean, you've been in Parliament for God knows how long. What have you done for Swami? I mean, he's the MP for Swami, isn't it? Yeah. Can you go there and ask them what singular achievement, for example, he has done amazingly well that based on that we should ring fence him? I think some of these things are very, unfortunate coming from people, and especially people in MPP. I mean, you do not get these dialects, this conversation from NDC. And I keep telling them, look, you are gradually changing. NDC had rather become a formidable political party with due processes than MPP. Over the years, you check, you realize that everything that we thought NDC was in the past is what MPP is now. No rules, no principles, they just speak it now. And they still think that they are the most democratic party. But if comments like that coming from one of the people who have been in Parliament for so long, you have to be worried. Because if an adult says that, I think I'm the best president, let's change the constitution, let me be there for the next time, how would you feel?
Good question.
Yeah.
Your final, thoughts on all of these matters.
I think that we should not sit down and concern when these political parties are behaving the way they do. We have to be hard on them. We have to tell them in the face, because their activities, their behaviors actually affect the wider political system. And so if we think that it's an internal party affairs and people can do all the mafias that they want to do, in the end, they will come and do it on the national plane. And that's what we see every day playing out at the EC. Because people think it's just politics, it's just mafia, it's just you have to do whatever you have to do to win elections. That's not acceptable. You have to give a fair playing field for everyone. If you want the vice president to speak at a national conference, which is for delegates, then of course you need to give the other contenders, Boache Jacko, Alan Chomante, Akotose, let them also speak, because they are also interested in the seat. Why would you want the president to be seated before a vice president enters? I mean, when did you ever see that? That protocol, you can't have that. I mean, the president is supposed to be the last to enter. But for people's personal interest, personal gains, they make the president come and sit. And then the vice president then come in, and then with all cheers. If you were not really strategizing in a way to give him the upper hand, what else would you, or what else will make you do that? So we need to tell them that it was not the best. The conference that they organized was not the best. It can deepen the divisions in the party. And that's the very reasons why it could take you years to mend the cracks in the party. You do not need 2 years to select a leader. Right. So that just in case it doesn't go well, you can resolve. If it doesn't go well, but everybody thinks that it was properly done, it wouldn't take even 1 week to resolve it, because the losing side will call the other guy and say, my friend, you won it on a very good note. But for what they're doing, that's what would take even years for you to resolve issues when it doesn't go well in the parties.
Well, Doc, it's been good.
Thank you for having me.
You've juggled my memory on the MPP, and only time will tell how this goes. Once they elect a flag bearer, we shall see how that pans out.
If you have the time, just check on my thesis. You'll see quite a lot of stuff in there. And sometimes I ask myself, the party that I wrote about and talked about all these, I'm sure my next time when my examiner sees me is going to say, but you wrote all these things about this party. What is it? That's the point. But I feel that they have to do a lot more to capture the imagination that kind of enthralled the country in 2000. They've lost it, and for me it looks like the NDC is really doing quite well, and we have to say it. They are now very, very formidable than what the NPP is doing, and they have to actually go back on the drawing board and check it.
Well, Doc, thank you so much for engaging us today. And we shall come back. We shall find time and come back, maybe sometime in the future, maybe when the MPP has a flag bearer, and you can give your take on what you see moving forward.
Excellent.
But thank you so much for your
Thank
time.
you so much for coming.
This has been an interaction with Dr. Kopi Mensah, Senior Lecturer here at the University of Ghana Business School. He also is a political marketing expert. I'm Benjamin Akako. Thank you for joining for this conversation.